Hey everyone, and welcome back to Movie Night with Kit, which we are now filming about 24 hours before it's supposed to go live. So, this is going to be a bit of a different one tonight, because, well, I'm probably not going to have much time to film anything else regarding this stuff. So, you'll have noticed that not a single video I've uploaded this month has been horror based. Literally anything but not horror. I've said for a while now that horror month is probably a thing of the past. And instead we're replacing it with a slightly different idea that can go all year round. And I think I'm going with the title of Kit's Haunting Hour. Not really an hour long because I don't want to talk for an hour about fucking horror. But yeah. So let's start with the film that this video was supposed to be about, because I'm actually going to cover 4 because I've been going to Cineworld to watch all of them. All of the horror thingies, all of the horror classics is the line now. So that is The Exorcist, that is Hellraiser, that is Friday the 13th, and that is Christine. Which is one of the reasons I'm kind of glad that I waited until just close to the release of the video to film this. So, to start with, let's go with the film that this was supposed to be about. Friday the 13th. So, Friday the 13th, on first glance, looks like another entry in what I call, rather lovingly, maybe loathingly, shameless slasher season. Yeah, because every October, everyone's got to release a slasher, and it's ridiculous. I'm so sick of it. So, slashers are a bit dull at the best of times. Like, sometimes they can be funny, but there's nothing scary about a man running around in a mask trying to murder his victims. The only slasher in recent memory that I found even remotely amusing was Freaky. And even that was because of, well, basically it being a relatively decent premise for one. So, Friday the 13th challenged everything I thought I knew about it, because I've never seen Friday the 13th. That's actually a running theme with all 4 of these films, Tara. So, it starts out with something that mostly isn't a subversion of everything I knew. It starts out with 2 people fucking, or trying to. They were about to. It didn't quite get that far, I don't think. They were doing it. They were going to go at it, and then it's revealed that something unseen to us is watching them. A lad walks over to that something, and he says hello, and he's immediately stabbed by that something. We don't see this. Like, we don't see what or who it is. And then we get the girl trying to get away from that something, but because the something is at the stairway, all she can do is back up into the corner, hoping that something doesn't get her. she's killed. At no point do they show the killer, which raises tensions a little bit. Like, it's a little bit ridiculous, and to be honest, the audio was ridiculous in that screening. Like, it got ridiculously loud at times. The music was unbearably loud, so... But that was the kind of cold open to the film. We then cut to who we are supposed to assume is the main character, Alice, if memory serves. Alice. So, yes, it shows what I know. Annie, that's the one. Alice was the other one. So, Annie is looking for Camp Crystal Lake. Yeah, Camp Crystal Lake. And she's warned by several people that basically the place is a death trap. It's cursed, as several increasingly creepy older men put it to her. It's alleged that over the years, multiple people there have died, starting with a kid drowning and then 2 counsellors being stabbed a year later. And basically they build up this camp to have this massive reputation. And I'm just sat there thinking, place isn't haunted, it's just targeted by one person. Like, you know. And then they drop the bombshell that basically... I don't know if they dropped the bombshell at that point, actually, so I might hold off on mentioning it for now. Yeah, they don't mention it until later. But, yeah, so... she continues heading to camp, and we get a brief look at camp with the other with the actual counsellors all convening. And the camp organiser, I think he was, Ned, I think... No, Steve Christie. Okay. So, sorry, names... my head's like a sieve for names. So Steve ends up leaving quite early on because he has to go and run some errands and get some supplies. He's out for the majority of the movie, which makes him a suspect because his car is the same as the killer's car, who gives Annie a lift and eventually murders her after going right past the camp. So we're led to believe things are pretty wacky. But we're still not showing the killer, obviously, because the big reveal of the killer's identity even got me. So you've got the kids, and to cut a long story short, each of them is way too horny for their own good, and after we get segments of the movie that feel reminiscent to the parts of It where they're jumping into the lake and stuff, things are just a complete, like, you know, we're always shown from the killer's perspective until the very end. And I didn't think that the killer's identity could be remotely impactful on me. But I can't lie, because I liked the characters, I was a little bit more concerned for them, because the way I see it is this. You're unlikely to get chased by a guy who's dressed like one of the founding fathers' masquerade party caricatures. It's just not going to happen. Like, well, it might, but it's a bit of a ridiculous thing to dress as. So that's Thanksgiving right off the table. Like, you know, a man running around in a hockey mask, which is what the series has become at this point, if we go by its reputation. It's ridiculous. Like, it's utterly insane that that's what this becomes, because this film, instead of giving us a dressed up maniac, doesn't show the killer until the very end, like I say. And this builds up fear because it can happen to you, because no one lives to tell the tale. You only see the killer when Alice sees the killer towards the very end, as the only survivor of the entire incident. We're led to believe, especially nowadays, because my ears perked up when the name Jason Voorhees was mentioned, because everyone knows who Jason is. I mean, I was a huge Tokyo Ghoul fan. Jason was the inspiration for Yamari, one of the villains from Tokyo Ghoul. And even before that, I knew who Jason was. It's like everyone knows who Ghostface is. Everyone knows who Pennywise is. The majority of the internet, especially everyone from the 2000s internet, knows who Regan is. You know, it's all important, like, the way that these things interconnect. Look, So, I'm just there like, oh, it's Jason. And then, to spoil the ending completely, despite the fact that I don't think that anyone should. And seriously, click away now if you haven't seen this film, and go watch it. Like, go watch Friday the 13th. It's phenomenal. The killer. Let's give you a bit of detail on what happens. So, everyone is dead. The killer has managed to evade being caught so far. And then, a car that looks the same as both Steve and the killers drives up the road to the lake, to the camp, and Alice runs over to the driver, who reveals herself to be I don't know if I'd say elderly woman, but a middle-aged woman, the description says, claiming to be a friend of Steve, and she reveals herself to be Mrs. Voorhees, and then I'm just like, literally, I'm just stood there like, holy fuck, no, it's not 2003, it's 2023. A 43-year-old film managed to shock me. I can barely get through a TV show without being spoiled, because I have to go and look up the cast and stuff. She's the one that reveals that Jason, her son, actually drowned as the first victim at Camp Crystal Lake. And she blames his death on counsellors of the time screwing rather than supervising him. A fact she took out on literally everybody else. Even people that weren't alive when this happened. Maybe. 1980. Assuming the films were placed in the same year. Okay, they might have just been born, but still. Actually, a couple of the councils could have been the parents. Sorry, I can't take things seriously anymore. Like, I just can't. So, the only thing I didn't like about this film is that following this point, it becomes an overly long and self-indulgent chase sequence because Alice won't fucking kill Mrs. Voorhees, who has fully revealed herself to be the killer now. I get that she's scared, and to be fair, the act of taking another human life is something that I would imagine it would be quite traumatic. But the second time that Voorhees was unconscious, you really should have just killed her. It would have saved you so much time. So, yeah, eventually she's decapitated. And Alice takes herself to the, like, in a canoe to the middle of the lake, and she awakes and she's attacked by something. And I like this because it got me. Like, okay, so I've undergone a lot of personal changes recently, but even before that, like, horror hasn't scared me in quite some time. Jump scares occasionally get me because I don't like things jumping at me. Like, that's not fear, it's genuinely an aversion that makes little to no sense to me. But I don't fear things in movies, I don't really fear things in games. And I certainly do not fear overdone slashers. And I'm less scared than I should be about real knife crime. Like, you know, it... So, it got me when this decomposed body grabs Alice out of the lake. And then suddenly she wakes up in a hospital, so it's left unclear if she actually dreamed this. And then, after she mentions this to the police officer, who says there's no evidence of there being a body in the lake, Alice says, "Oh, he's still there then." And it cuts to kind of the lake with bubbles rising, suggesting that Jason is very much alive, which makes no fucking sense, but let's roll with it because horror's horror. So, I liked this film a lot, like, I did, and it's quite a unique one in that our Friday night movie wasn't a DVD or Blu-ray, or, as it will be next week, VHS. But instead, it got me out of the house for a bit. It saw me watch a movie in the most comfortable way I can imagine, because I don't like watching movies at home, really. If I can help it, I prefer watching them in the cinema, and I have an unlimited card for Cineworld, so it does happen. So that's Friday the 13th, and believe me, I love this. Please go and watch it yourself if you haven't already. Don't bother with the sequels, apparently they're shit. And this is a problem that I've kind of got with horror. Rule number one of horror in my book is you never watch the sequels. So, Friday the 13th is famous for being all about, like, it's basically the king of slashers. Like, it's the original, really. It's not the first ever slasher, I'm sure, but, like, pretty damn close. So, when it came to the horror classics thing, I knew I was going to watch a lot of horror this month. I wouldn't say what I've done is watch a lot of horror, but failing that, I'll watch a bit, and I'll go to the cinema and see some. Because the only horror film I've ever seen at the cinema is It. Both parts. Pretty damn good, but not really the point, is it? So, there is one horror film that I have always wanted to watch. There is a face that has always been in my mind since, I don't know, 2011, 2012 would probably have been the beginning of all of this. And to understand my obsession with eventually watching this film, you need to go back to the beginning, back to a little game on the internet called the Scary Maze game, which, as I'm sure many of you are aware, I have parodied before on here, very briefly. So, the premise of the Scary Maze is the maze, as it was always called prior to everything, is that you go through these increasingly difficult levels of a maze where you point where the dot is supposed to be, and then in a really tight corner where you're supposed to get real close to the screen as you get close to the end. Regan. And for those of you that don't know who Regan is, I'm not going to show you, because the less editing I have to do on this shit, the better. Sorry, I'm running out of time, and I have to be up in the morning because it's my first thing at work. Why do I do this to myself? Why do I do this? But I don't really want to leave my computer on while I sleep because it's a pain in the ass. But if I don't sort of, you get my point, you know. So, The Exorcist. My first attempt at watching The Exorcist. When I say attempt, I mean we had to keep on rescheduling, me and my friends, because I wanted to do this with people, because horror is a communal experience. The special edition VHS tape, which comes with not only the real deal, which for some reason I'm taking forever. I'm not going to unbox a tape, it's a pain in the arse doing all this as quick as I'm trying to do things. But this little thing, and more importantly, the book, which I will read. I probably won't review it, because when have I ever reviewed books on this channel? The most I could do was talk about one. So, The Exorcist was the first horror classic I saw in the cinema this year. And it very simply tells the story of a little girl who gets possessed by a demon. A very old demon. One who in sequels got a name, but who the fuck cares about that? Rule number one of horror: don't watch the sequels. So, Regan is a relatively ordinary little girl with divorced parents who finds herself getting increasingly frustrated after a certain point in the beginning of the film. So, actress Chris McNeil, her mother, eventually takes her for doctor stuff, and when I say the most terrifying thing about this film was seeing his child get prodded with needles and put for an MRI, and well, even though we didn't hear the child herself say it, a very suggestive comment that apparently the kid made. That was the only bits that got a little bit of a... I'm squeamish about needles and stuff, like, especially when it comes to kids getting hurt. And let it be clear, the historical context as to why this film was so feared back in the day, back in 1973, is because they, given this was a solid 30 years before I was even born, they all lived in a very religious world. They weren't really they feared Satan. We don't now, really. Like, don't get me wrong, I have my own connection with religion, but I'm not scared enough of Satan to fear a film about possession. I've seen about 1 million possession flicks, and I love them. I mean, Shameless Slasher season, Jennifer's Body, which, you know, that was a very interesting film, to say the least. So, my point is, there was that, and then there was the other fear, one that's built into us instinctively. We fear children getting hurt by something happening to them beyond our control. The demon went for the child, and frankly, that's unforgivable. You know, it just is. And this film tells a story of a Catholic priest who is losing his faith. He has a dying mother who he's doing his best to take care of independently. He's not even that old, but he's lived too long to be particularly enamoured with religion because of the classic, if God is all powerful and good, why would he let bad things happen? And yeah, I get that. As I say, I have my own relationship with this concept, and I'm not here for a religious talk. I'm not a priest. I will never be a priest. I don't want to be a priest, or a reverend, or anything like that. My only point is, there are answers to that. They're not particularly comforting ones, but there are answers. And I think it was Father Merrin, if memories... No. Father Merrin was the first one. not you. Sorry, I'm trying to find. Um. Father. Father Karras, that's the one. Sorry. Um. Father Karras is the one who's been falling through, like, falling out of love with religion. Damien. He he was a really good part of this film. Like, seeing his struggle with it all, and Chris McNeil, like, she's incredibly, like, distraught by everything going on, because all the doctors keep on telling her, "Oh, your daughter's dissociating. Your daughter's just got a load of mental problems. Your daughter is just growing up." And Chris knows this is bullshit. Like, her daughter has something seriously wrong with her, and she'll be damned if she lets some second-rate doctors tell her otherwise, because this is clearly something unnatural. And eventually she's brought to, like, she's put in contact with Damien, who basically tells her exorcism isn't a thing that's done anymore, and there's a reason for that. But eventually she wears him down, and he gets it approved by the Church of England, not the Church of England. I don't know what church it was. He gets the proof he needs to get approved. They approve it. They send an experienced priest to aid in the ritual, who I believe was Father Merrin. Yeah. And I must admit, the concept of exorcism is something I've come across in the past, and it was terrible. Like, because obviously demonic possession does not happen in real life. It doesn't. Assuming the Bible is true, bad things are a consequence of Satan. Having said that, possession in and of itself doesn't exist, and thank God for that. So the fact that we actually did exorcisms proves how fucking delusional the Catholic Church in particular was in a certain time period, and that's why it's looked back on as an embarrassment, which the film says. So, yeah. There are things in the film that didn't age particularly well. Not many, actually. Not as many as you'd think in a film about a demon from the 70s. But the only thing that I didn't really like was Regan projectile vomiting, because fuck that. Like, but apparently she was speaking in tongues, which is a very old religious concept. It's ridiculous. So, yeah. I all of this pain inflicted on this little girl, it's a shame. And the demon, I'm not calling it Pazuzu, I'm not. This is the only film that matters in the series, so we go off of what the film itself tells us. We can assume it's the devil. So, watching the demon basically inflict pain on Regan, leaving her covered in sores and boils and all that. Like, you know, basically Regan was dying, and it is a little bit strange that there's absolutely no evidence of any of this. Like, the possession isn't why she got into that state in and of itself. The possession just led to it. The reason was she wasn't being taken care of, she wasn't being washed, she wasn't being healed, she wasn't being anything. So Regan kept on having damage done to her by the demon. So, you know, it's weird, and we can think about this stuff all day. Like shit like the demon, what it did with that crucifix, which I don't really want to mention because fucking hell, she was 12. And no. Like I say, small elements of the film got to me, but one thing that I think nowadays modern audiences forget in particular, to break away from the topic for a second, just real quickly, demons have been so flanderised by the media as these silly, goofy monsters. Not even always monsters. Like, we're so used to the idea of humanoid demons with human-like personalities, with just a bit of a dick. Or even, go on, half demons like Whistler in Buffy, or Doyle in Buffy, who literally have nothing evil about them. I mean, Whistler's a bit of a dick, but Doyle, nothing wrong with Doyle at all. Technically, Doyle's only an angel, but that's not the point. So, shows like that, as much as I love a lot of them, have done a lot of damage to how modern audiences look at demons and demon blood. Demons have always been, in mythology, pure evil, inherently. Demon blood makes a creature violent and unopposable. So, the fact that the film wasn't afraid to go there is a good thing. And the book, let's be clear, a lot of this came from a book. It's not wholly accurate, but, well, let it slide because I haven't read the book. So, my point is, demons are supposed to be evil, and people would do well to remember that, because whatever the fuck Supernatural says is not the truth about the matter. So, yeah, the fact that it went that far is actually a good thing, because we do well to remember what demons actually are, aside from not real, but again, not the point. So, the actual exorcism, a lot of dots connect in my head while watching this as to where random shit I've heard over the years came from. The big one was there was a whole meme when I was 12, maybe. It probably wasn't a popular internet thing, but it was just kind of like an ongoing joke at school for a while, when I was in year 7, where a few people in particular would run around constantly going, "The power of Christ compels you! The power of Christ compels you!" And I didn't know where they got it from. I thought they were just being doofuses. The chances are, knowing these lot, that they actually had recently watched The Exorcist and just found it really fun. So, that's The Exorcist, because I think I've talked more than enough about that film, given there's still 2 more films to talk about. It might end up being an hour. Fucking hell. Hellraiser. This film and The Exorcist are tied for my favourite horror film of all time now. Until these last few weeks, I hadn't seen either of them. So that's fun. That's very fun. So, Hellraiser. A couple move into a spooky house. It's shown before this point that a man got this strange puzzle box of a dubious man in a pub, opened the box in a very weird room, was confronted with these monsters, including the legendary Pinhead, appears to have been tortured and died there. The couple move into their house. The place has clearly been left unattended, and it's mentioned that the main male lead, I say that's not really true. Larry, Frank's brother, Frank being the man that was tortured and killed. Actually, it doesn't show the monsters at the start. I forgot about that. So, they move in. Place has clearly been destroyed. Like, not destroyed, but like things like rotted food that's clearly been left out a long time. So Larry and his wife Julia move in. Julia has these very, very clear flashbacks to having an affair with Frank. For fuck's sake, this film, off to a great start, as you can see. So, the general gist of things is Larry bleeds onto the floor of the room where Frank was tortured, causing a very strange creature to kind of form out of the blood. And this made me think, blood of the brother, you know, it always has to be blood. Blood is life, you know? It makes sense. So, yeah, Frank is this kind of, he's not a creature, he's just not quite human at the minute, because he's not human enough. Like, he's not reformed enough to be considered human. And actually, he spent most of the film reminding me of the flayed Warren from Buffy. Literally, it's just what Willow did to him. Major spoilers. I don't care at the moment. So, not Warren ends up reuniting with Julia, who he commands to basically kill people and basically give him their bodies so he can feed on them and become human again. And yeah, although Julie is initially quite distraught after her first kill, again, it's the whole concept of first kill, watching the light go out in your victim's eyes. It's apparently quite a terrifying experience. She slowly becomes empowered with this. And yeah, he explains to her that basically he was tortured by a group from hell called the Cenobites. Pinhead and his pals. Strange people. So Julia gradually restores his body, and then eventually he's nearly human again, and Kirsty, who is Larry's daughter, who Julia's never shown anything but disdain for Kirsty. But Larry's talked her into trying to make an effort with Julia. So she goes over to the house and sees Julia leading a strange man in, acting very flirtatious. So she tries to break in, and eventually she's caught by Julia and Frank. Frank is a creep, let this be clear. Look, I get he was tortured by beings from the depths of hell, but that's your fucking niece. Like, fucking hell. So, all of that, and so begins to cat and mousing, but Kirsty takes the box. Ends up passing out, ends up in a hospital, and then, because she can't fucking help herself, because human beings, you're like a fucking kid in a candy store when something dangerous has happened. Say you lot, I'm allegedly human too, but still, you fucking lot, something clearly dangerous, something that the very dangerous masochist wants you to not steal. Oh, I know what I'll do. I'll play with it. And then she's attacked by the Cenobites. And, well, what else was going to fucking happen? You know, she's attacked by them, but she manages to avoid her judgment for now by promising them their escaped victim. The thing is, she gets back to the house to find a very strange looking Larry, claiming that Frank is dead. But he's very clearly not Larry. Like, that, he literally looks like, he's like Uncle in Doctor Who. I think it was Uncle. Was it Uncle? Maybe. The guy with the patchwork. It's like if that patchwork was done just with skin rather than literal patchwork. There. So he then starts getting all creepy, like, "Come to daddy." I wish I was dramatising. I'm not. It was actually creepier than that. So, again, cat and mouse. The game of cat and mouse in horror is a game that I utterly fucking despise. But here I didn't mind too much because I was loving the film and I'd grown to quite like Kirsty. I was very fond of her. I wanted her to survive. Having said that, death might have been merciful on her because fucking hell is she going to be traumatised after this one. So, Yeah. Frank eventually confesses to everything, and the Cenobites here and condemn him to eternal torment again. And Kirsty tries to escape, and suddenly you find that everyone is still trying to kill her. The Cenobites are still after her, despite promising. Well, they didn't promise. They said that they'd consider letting her go. They're creatures from the darkest depths of hell. What do you think is going to happen? So, a massive chase scene appears. Her boyfriend appears at the door. Both of them are nearly killed by the last two creatures. The puzzle box is able to get rid of them. They're just about to escape. She's going to be fucking traumatised for the rest of her life. But I loved this film. You know, the Cenobites are completely unexplained, more or less, which I think the sequels likely ruin. This is why we don't do sequels to horror films. You know, I recognise Pinhead from some horror clip art I've seen in the past. But other than that, they were pretty scary. They were like eldritch nightmares. And stop motion is always scarier than CGI. So, well, aside from really shit CGI. But, yeah, so I loved the monsters in this film. And Frank is a frightening villain. Again, I like villains that aren't sympathetic at times. Like, I don't want all villains to be unsympathetic, but Frank being a complete piece of shit makes sense. So, I love this film. I'm certainly going to make that a yearly watch. So, at long last, because we're running out of time for me to have the energy for this, I bring you Christine. Stephen King. I knew I was in for a treat when I heard that. Stephen King hates this film, but you know what he's like. Oh, Stevie boy doesn't like a lot of film adaptations of his work. Especially not the best ones. So, The Shining and this. So, Christine sees a run-of-the-mill nerd who reminds me of someone from something else I've seen. That guy from Liv and Maddie, Joey. That's who he reminded me of. So, he's the sort of kid that gets picked on at school, the bullies fucking hate him, and it's a Stephen King thing, so you know what the bullies are going to be like. Frankly, these bullies were tame. They were still pieces of shit. But given the total absence of any minorities, we actually managed to get away without the constant bigotry from them. But again, I don't mind that, because villains are villains. And these are bullies from time periods where, yes, they would absolutely do that sort of shit. But either way. So, his best friend is one of the cool guys. It's one of them classic tales. Dennis. A new girl starts at school called Lee that every guy fucking wants. Like, fucking hell. And initially, I was like, hang on, is that Charisma Carpenter? I don't know why I thought this. I must have been knackered yesterday. But it wasn't. It was someone completely different. But I was just like, I think internally I wanted the hot chick in the school to be Cordelia Chase from Buffy. I think I wanted that more than anything. So, by the time that Dennis goes and asks her out, admittedly on a bet, he can have his pick. It doesn't really matter. But he's chill about it. He isn't a dick. But girls have a bit of a habit of shamelessly coming up to him and being like, "Oh, are we on for Friday? When?" So, he asks her out. And she's like, "No, I've already got a date." And I'm like, I know who that is. Because earlier, the film had opened with a car being manufactured, a man getting his arm attacked by the front bonnet on the car, and a man dying in the front seat when the radio turned on. This was in the 50s, this little segment. Years later, the car's beaten up and Dennis and the other one who... I only saw it last night. Come on. Arnie. That's the one. Fucking hell, it's even a name I like. So, Arnie, while they're driving past this car, is fucking obsessed with it. So he goes over, buys it, despite the fact that he can't finance it, he can't register it on his own because of laws. So he becomes obsessed with the car. Shocker, right? And he fixes it up, and damn does he fix it up. He does a good job on that car. And it's discovered at a football game where Dennis gets absolutely pummeled into oblivion, to the point where he's nearly paralysed by what happened. Because he spent a second too long watching Arnie and Lee make out. But Arnie and Lee's relationship, because that's who Lee's now dating. The uncle nerd who is now suddenly a lot cooler. Because he has a car. The shittest car in the universe, but a car. Their relationship isn't perfect because Christine is Arnie's one true love now. His car. And Lee's noticed how much he seems to care more about the car than about her. So, yeah. We later find out that the car kills people still. And it does so when the radio plays. It first tries to kill Lee out of jealousy. Then the bullies that from earlier destroy the car because apparently they have nothing better to do. The car, seemingly without a driver, rampages and murders them. All of them, one by one. Even driving through fire, which is pretty cool. And eventually there's a fight between the car, which we find out might have been driven by Arnie in this final battle, Dennis and Lee, because Lee and Arnie break up. Dennis tries to comfort Lee and also doesn't trust the fucking car because he's heard stories about what happened with that thing. Because the previous owner also fucking died in relation to the car, as did his daughter. His 5-year-old daughter died in the car. There are not bigger red flags than that for the car. But again, Arnie was possessed. Not his fault at all. Arnie dies, and eventually they're able to fucking destroy the car. But that shit takes pummeling. They smash it into a cube. The thing is, the car self-repairs. The ending shows one little bit of the metal realigning into place. So yeah, this film, I liked it. I liked it a lot. Again, jump scares get me sometimes. It's pretty neat. I really, really liked it. Like, I don't know what else I can say about it. Like, it's a film about a haunted car. Go and watch that. Like, fucking hell, is it worth your time? But yeah, so Stephen King characters are almost always stereotypes of something or other. Arnie has some pretty shit parents, and I'm not gonna lie, I don't blame him for rebelling against them one bit. I will say, he became gradually more and more of a dick and became unlikable to the point where when he died I was not entirely mourning him. But yeah, so they believed at the end, like, because this car's signature thing is its radio only plays 50s music, and whenever that radio is on, something weird happens. And at the very end, when the thing's like pummeled into oblivion, in broad daylight, they hear 50s music, and it turns out to just be a guy with a boombox. It was a nice little gag. But yeah, like I say, I liked it. I liked it a lot, and you could definitely do worse than watching Christine, but it's probably my least favourite of the four. Now, I might be seeing another horror classic. I don't think that's on until November. And I don't even know if I already have a screening booked for that. Hold Fire. That sounds weird. Psycho. October 25th. I'm already seeing something, unfortunately. Because I am going to... I'm literally seeing Five Nights at Freddy's an hour later. Like, an hour after the screening begins. So I'm probably not seeing Psycho. And that's assuming I'm not working. Like, fucking hell. Like, I'm already, like, ridiculously busy. So, yeah, I can't find any more ways of saying I liked this film. But, as much as I love Stephen King, I do think that the others were more creative. Hellraiser is definitely my favourite of the four I've talked about tonight. But The Exorcist was probably the strongest story. So, yeah. Anyway, with that, I've talked for a fucking hour, and this is why I didn't want to do it. My throat hurts. So I think I'm going to do a cup of tea and get ready for bed, because I'm a responsible adult now. No, I'm not. No, fucking not. Anyway, take care of yourselves, guys. I'll see you next week for Narnia. I think. I'm hoping. Not only is it Narnia, it's the BBC one. I've never seen this before, so I genuinely have no clue what to expect. So, take care of yourself, guys. I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.